For the format of our conversation today, we have a few questions to share, but I'll also try to weave in any questions from participants on the call and make sure that everybody has time to chime in. So I'll get going. Could you take a moment and just talk a little bit about a recent or past change that you implemented?
Sure. So this change over to Birdview was pretty major for our organization. We spent a couple years planning and doing this implementation, and then alongside of the Birdview implementation itself, we're also in the process of migrating our CMS into Microsoft Dynamics as a new solution, as well as building some custom middleware to talk between these systems and our billing software. So there's been some pretty major shifts going on and changes for our staff that we've kind of concurrently been managing, and it's been challenging. It's been very exciting for us as well.
Awesome, thanks, Marcy. And I think these kinds of changes are important, right? This is how we keep our organizations growing. So, what were some of the challenges you faced when you're making these kinds of changes?
Yeah, for us, a lot of things that you touched on earlier in the webinar, right? Like people are used to doing things and are very busy. They're working heads down. And so making such a big change like this and getting people excited for it is difficult because, they want to just keep going, and stopping to learn a new system and changing the way you work can be really disruptive and really scary. So that was a major part. But also, just as I mentioned, we were doing multiple systems at once. And so kind of changing the way the organization thinks about project management, workflow management, financial, like all of the things that are being touched by this at the same time, and making sure that we were very careful and deliberate with how we were planning each of the systems and how they integrate together was a particular challenge, right? Because as I mentioned, it's a multi-year endeavor and a lot of changes occur just on one platform. Oh, we forgot about this. Well, how is that going to affect the other system that we're planning to make sure that we don't have any major issues and road bumps along the way? I think those were the two main things that pose the greatest challenge overall. And really, it was about really careful planning, really constant and careful communication, documentation, and then building in those advocates, those change champions that you mentioned, just to making sure that across the organization you had folks that were exposed to it, excited about it, and could speak to the change on their individual teams.
Thanks, Marcy. Perfect. How did you get your stakeholders involved in this process?
Yeah, it was really successful for us. What I did is, for each I broke out the project into, I guess, small components. Like, this is the part that is going to affect our production team members. This is the components that will affect our sales team, et cetera. And then I would kind of work with our COO, and we would build it out. Okay, this is how we think it's going to work. Let's kind of do some preliminary testing. And then once we felt like we had considered all the angles and it was ready, then I would bring in some key stakeholders that would be affected by that component. So that might be the functional team managers, that how your production teams are going to use this part of the software. I would bring them in and expose them to it, get them familiar with it, and then have them kind of do some testing and playing around and go, oh, you know what, you didn't consider this, or how about that? So they could kind of advocate for their team and what their needs would be beyond what we could think about, and come and implement that, do another round. And so we do that with each of the various kind of teams or parts of the team. And this worked really well because then by the time we were getting towards the final testing and cutover phase, we had all of these folks in place that were familiar with the system and kind of bought into the methods that we were using in Birdview, and made it much more smooth.
And so how did that roll into your training period? So did that mean more training or less training? Like, how did that impact your training and rollout?
I'm not sure if it equated to more or less training, but what it did equate to was less, I I guess, support in the training focused just on me, or just on me and my boss that were the main folks putting this together. So we had those, those change champions, as you call them, within each functional group. So after the initial training and the support documents that I sent out and all those kinds of things, sure, we had to provide some support, but they had folks within their own team that understood the way that they needed to work, that they could go to for ongoing support without necessarily having a single point of failure. So that was really helpful.
Oh, that's excellent. So I'm curious, because organizationally, that's reflective of culture. So how do you feel like your culture affects your approach to change management?
That's an interesting question. I hadn't considered. I don't know.
Sorry, I hope I didn't just put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. I mean, we have a very fast-paced, business structure. We have a lot of, projects that happen in a matter of days and then longer term. So, and a pretty tight-knit culture as well. I mean, a really collaborative culture. How that affected the change management? I don't know. I think that our approach to managing the cutover, again, was very deliberate, very scheduled in advance, and kind of staged out. So we did like a soft launch period. So we brought in just a small amount of clients and a select team that work on those particular clients that we could test it out. And so we kind of built like a small functional team around the soft launch, essentially. And just because of that kind of close-knit collaborative culture that we have, I mean, that worked really well. It was like building a tiny project team. It allowed us to work out the kinks without introducing a lot of risk to the entire organization and client pool. So that was our main approach there. That really helped us out a lot. I don't know if that really answered your question, though.
That's okay. I guess my question is, what are the key learnings that you've taken out of this that you could apply to future changes?
Yeah, so we're really fortunate. Everything went really, really smoothly for us. Probably smoother than I even anticipated. The change adoption was really good, and afterwards, once we made the cut, there really weren't any significant issues like, oh, we overlooked this is a major problem. So really, really fortunate there. And I think that, if I have a learning, it took us probably a lot longer than we had originally planned, but all of that really careful planning, similar to Jeff, we did a ton of research beforehand before we even chose a tool, just documenting out, what does success look like for us? What do we really need from a new tool? And breaking that into, what are the must-haves versus what are the nice-to-haves, those kinds of things. I mean, really breaking down the requirements that far, doing careful planning, breaking it into its components, finding a great solution like Birdview with a good team that's going to, be with you each step of the way, checking in each week on, how it's going, what challenges you're facing, do we need to pivot, testing as you go. All of that careful planning, that additional time really equated to a smooth transition and high success in making that change. So that's what I would recommend for anybody else incorporating a change like this.
Awesome, thank you. So now that you've made this changeover, you've come over to Birdview, or you've changed your software, has what success looks like to you changed now that you're looking in your rearview mirror?
I don't know that it's changed like the definition of success, but it's definitely much easier to measure with our new tool sets. We've saved probably hundreds of hours a month by making this change in kind of administrative efforts and setting up and administering projects and data in the systems. The data is much easier to get to and analyze. We've removed a lot of manual compilation of data and report creation and stuff like that. So now we can go deeper and look at things in a different way and come to that much quicker right? And have these analytical discussions, because instead of spending the time creating and finding that data, we can just look at it, analyze it, have discussions, which is beautiful.
And so I guess now that we think about it, so you've come to the other side of the change, and it sounds like you've both done a great job of communicating with your team as you go through this. Do you look backwards and talk to your team about the successes that you've achieved? Like, is there merit in taking that back to the team as well, and post-change communications?
As I mentioned, we kind of looked at a soft measurement for, how much efficiency are we gaining here? How much time are we saving? And looking at that is definitely a successful metric. And then, we're still embarking on this change for the CMS side of things. And so we're still in the midst of all of this. And it's a good thing to look at what we've achieved by making the change to Birdview, because there's still, those fears are still bubbling up for the new system. So it's like, hey, I know, but this seems scary. Look at what we achieved here. We're doing so much better. Think about all that stuff that we were able to streamline by doing this. We're going to be even better and even stronger when we get there. So it's been a tool to help overachieve that, to help overcome that. But yeah, that's about as far, look back, I think, as we're going right now, because we're still so focused on looking ahead.
Yeah, more than fair. Okay, did anyone, any of our attendees have any questions that they wanted to ask our panelists? I don't see anything in the Q&A chat. That doesn't mean that nobody's sitting on a burning question. Okay, we're a little bit, just because I'm sure Iris had something critical come up that she couldn't make the call today, so we're a little bit ahead of schedule. I guess for me, the final question I would throw out is what piece of advice would you share with somebody who was looking at any kind of major change within their organization?
Sure. I think I touched on this a bit ago, but it's really about, here's the piece of advice I would give. I think it would be to try to look outside the box of what you're doing today. I think we get a lot of focus on, but this is how we've done it, and this is what's worked before. And you've really got to try to break out of that mindset. What's going to be ideal for your company? What are the things that you really need? What are the things that could make it better? And really, just try to ideate around that and plan really, really carefully. Do your research, document, communicate. And if you do all of that, then you can really create a solution that's going to be the best for your company.
One question from our attendees. How did you communicate with the company as a whole as to what changes were being made? And then emails, ? Or meetings, ?
We had communicated this out well at the top. So a couple of years ago, we, as a company, we share our company strategic initiatives at the top of the year. So, hey, this is one major initiative that's going to be coming. We don't know what we're going to do when, but we're going to be changing our workflow software. We were previously in 2 sort of disjointed systems. And so that, it was kind of well known that that wasn't ideal, and we wanted to make a change at some point to make that better. So we let the teams know in advance, like, hey, this is going to be an initiative we're going to run to make this better. And then in our monthly all hands meetings with the staff, as that initiative as I started to embark on that initiative, there were regular updates to the team about what was going on. So here's the progress that's made. Here's why we're doing it. Here's how this is going to be beneficial to you. Here's where we're at and what's coming. And of course, as it got closer and closer to completion, those updates got, more robust and launched into the training and things like that. So we made sure that the teams were well prepared and understood what was coming and why it was going to make a good impact to the company and to the way that they work. So by the time we got to implementation, they were prepared and ready as best they could be. We also created a channel. We work at a Slack. So we created a support channel for the transition as it got close. So we could answer questions that maybe affected the entire staff. They could see how those questions were being answered, and, you know, route them to support, and provide maybe links to relevant articles that help them with the training and stuff like that. So it was a very transparent approach.
Thank you. Any other questions from folks on the call? Is there anything either of you would like to share just about change management, and you know what, and on me as well, I did a poor job of introducing both of your organizations at the beginning. So if you want to share anything about your organizations as well, a great opportunity to do so, with my apologies for missing that earlier.
Oh, no problem.
Sorry about that.
I think I was off the call while you were doing the introductions anyway, so I wasn't sure what was said getting on as the panelist. But anyhow, so Etna Interactive is a digital marketing agency focused on aesthetic medicine. We do website redesign projects and ongoing marketing, digital marketing for those clients. And I run the team of project managers for our organization. Yeah, and so we had been, as I mentioned, we had been in some kind of disjointed systems. We started with one, we bolted on another one. We had data and workflow in separate places, and it was making it really difficult for collaboration and project tracking and, you know, data management, all those kinds of things. So that eventually led us to investing in a company and making a change for the better and embarking on this change. And as I mentioned, it's been really successful. A couple years in the making, but well worth it.
Thanks, Marcy, and thanks again for your time today.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing we did as part of the preliminary training was set up some test projects in the testing environment, and the project had tasks that the individuals had to do. So they had to go through and add a time entry, or they had to go do A, B, and C in order to complete their training. So it actually got them hands-on instead of just listening to us walking them through. They actually had steps to complete right away to get them acclimated to the system. I think that was really helpful.
We have an additional question here just asking about how many employees you have within your organizations. And I would sort of staple onto that as well, from that, what percentage were involved in the change that you were going through?
We have at Etna about 60 employees. There were 2 of us that were, driving the change, but I mean, over time, it's hard to put a percentage on it. I have 4 project managers who are deeply involved at different stages. And then, as I mentioned, I would bring in key stakeholders at different times. So it really varied. I would say maybe another 10% were stakeholders that I brought in from time to time. And then at soft launch, I want to say, we're probably about 25% of the company, at least 30% at that point, until we did the full launch, something like that.
Okay. So I can't thank you enough for joining us and really highlighting the common challenges that you've faced and the different approaches that you took. I've learned a lot today. So thank you for your time and for sharing your expertise.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, and have a fantastic day.